Our story opens with a woman in a trunk, but one she's not locked in just yet, being awoken by what looks like a ferret. This is Melina, and she has no recollection of how she got here, but quickly realizes her legs aren't working. Certainly going to make escaping difficult. She drags herself to the edge of the vehicle to see a trash bag full of clothes and travel belongings. They happen to be hers, and they happen to have blood on them. Before she can fully comprehend the situation at hand, she notices a man approaching from the distance, while at the same time her phone goes off in that bag. She manages to just barely grab it in time and pretends to be unconscious as the armed man tosses the rest of her stuff into the nearby dumpster and locks her in. Nice move saving that vital resource at least. That was a smart decision. What isn't a smart decision is choosing to use said vital resource and its limited battery supply in order to attempt to contact her boyfriend before calling police. She's trying to check on his well-being but assumes the worst when he not only doesn't answer, but when she also finds his hat lying in the trunk next to her. Those things of course don't prove anything, and I wouldn't recommend losing hope so easily. Melina's next course of action is to try and pry her prison open, which is always worth an attempt at least, but of course not likely to work, just like it doesn't here. While trying this, her phone rings. It's her sister Mona calling to talk about her pregnancy. Yes, that's very sweet, but this of course is not the time for chit-chat, which Melina tries to make very clear as she begs for her sister to call emergency services. But of course, Mona doesn't take this seriously and assumes it's a bad prank. Fed up with her sister, Melina hangs up and tries to call for the cops herself. Finally. However, she's just a bit too late, as the car has driven to an area without service. Because of course it has. Melina sees she now has 76% battery left, and smartly lowers the phone brightness to conserve that limited energy. Good idea. She follows this up by inspecting her legs and spines for potential injuries, yet thankfully finds none, meaning her paralysis should just be a temporary side effect and not a permanent affliction, hopefully. Eventually, with the aid of darkness, she sees a red flashing light coming from a camera and plays the video footage saved on it. This belonged to her and her boyfriend, Eno, and it shows them camping and spending time together. A reminder of who she's fighting to see once more and what she may have already lost. But the bittersweet memories suddenly turn into a living nightmare with the absolutely shocking next clip she sees. As the couple were traveling, they apparently chose to hitchhike, which was a huge mistake. The driver turned on Eno, possibly ending him in the process, and forces Melina to gulp down some knockout drug at gunpoint. I guess he didn't know the camera was on her and still recording, however, as it was left in her pocket as he drags her limp body to the trunk she now resides in and happens to reveal his face in the process. Melina proves to be clever and resourceful once more, as she takes a photo of the driver's face. A good bit of evidence that can now be shared more easily if she ever gets service again, of course. She sends the picture, her current GPS location, and another message begging for help to be called to her sister once more, in the hopes that the text will eventually get through. Nothing to do now but play the waiting game. But Melina refuses to sit around and do nothing and looks up how to escape from the trunk of a car online. Not a bad use of resources in this situation, especially with nothing better to do. Ideally, you'd want to know this stuff in advance to not use up precious time and battery life on research during the crisis itself, but better late than never. At least you all watching this will have an edge for this kind of situation if it unfortunately ever befalls you. She tries everything on the list, from finding and removing a lock, locating a latch of any kind, and attempting to break out one of the tail lights from the inside. But nothing seems to work. Still, all worth trying. Eventually, she receives a call from her dad and realizes this must mean she has a signal, so she tells him she'll call him back and immediately hangs up to ring the police. It works, and she tells a cop everything she knows so far, during which her papa attempts to call again, but she of course has more pressing matters currently and declines him. The cops inform her that they can track her phone, but only to the nearest cell tower, and not its exact location. She attempts to help narrow that search down by using the phone's GPS, which does help some, but not as much as she would have hoped. She tries to give more detail about the car she's in, but of course can't quite remember with her panic-filled, drug-hazed memory. And her dad keeps calling back. Eventually, she gives in and answers his call, putting the cops on hold. Not sure if that's the wisest decision, especially with her not sending that picture of the kidnapper's face yet, but hey, maybe Dad can help too. Let's hear what he has to say. Her father claims he got an anonymous message asking for 250,000 euros in ransom money. That's good news overall, as it means they'll want to keep her alive for now. But otherwise, he has no clue what's going on. Melina gets him up to speed and follows this information up by sending him the picture of the driver so he can deliver it to the police. This doesn't sit well with him, however, as he refuses to contact authorities at all to not risk enraging the kidnappers. Melina now ends both calls. Wait, what? If she was trying to convince her dad to contact police, why would she hang up with them? Guess instead of getting through to her father, his fear of angering the kidnappers by going against their demands of no cops got through to her, and so she ended the call to be safe. Let's hope she doesn't regret that choice. It's now here thanks to a broken offside mirror stored in the trunk with her, where Melina makes one of the most terrifying discoveries. In the reflection, she sees a gaping wound on her flank and pulls her shirt up to reveal that the kidnapper not only stole one of her kidneys, but that the piss-poor stitch job they did has now come undone. Now she's bleeding out and won't last much longer if she doesn't find something to patch herself up with. She scrambles for any supplies and eventually finds a lighter, which she attempts to use in order to cauterize the wound. That is gonna hurt, but you gotta do what you gotta do to survive. But Melina apparently can't actually bring herself to do it and passes out from pain, blood loss, and panic. Unfortunate but understandable, all things considered. She's in a really tough situation. Thankfully, she's soon reawoken by a bump in the road and immediately drinks some nearby whiskey that was stored back there with her. On the one hand, that is a good choice for pain suppression and even potentially calming her nerves. On the other hand, it's a vasodilator, and she's already lost enough blood. And that fact mixed with alcohol could easily cause her to not be thinking straight, and you really want a level head for critical situations such as these. So I'd advise against drinking while bleeding out. She next decides to use her sock to soak up some of the blood, which can't be very sanitary or even able to absorb very much compared to her shirt, but it gets the job done. While doing that, she overhears the driver talking in the car as he tells someone they'll be arriving at 4:30. Not sure who he's talking to or where they're going, but it can't be good for Melina, who now only has a little over an hour before her potentially final destination. With just 60% battery life remaining now, she wastes some of that precious energy to play back a voice recording from Eno. Sweet and keeps up morale, but maybe not the best use of a limited resource. Next, she bites down on her lover's hat, uses the laces from her shoe as thread to sew the staples together, and her earring to pin it all in place. Very resourceful and impressive. Just have to hope that holds up until she can get some real medical attention now. After her do-it-yourself surgery, Melina gets a call back from the police, who she shares her concerns with about angering the kidnappers through talking to them. The officer on the other end of the line tries their best to encourage her to trust them and not give up. But by the somber tone of her voice, it appears that Melina already has. The cop shares their name as a sign of good faith. It's Eliza, and this is their first time dealing with a kidnapping, but they're trying their hardest and attempting to get as much information as they can. A spark of hope is suddenly reignited in Melina, as she realizes she can upgrade her data plan for the month to get better internet service, and therefore a more accurate GPS location. Man, this would be such a great spot for a sponsor, wouldn't it? Well, maybe not, as this attempt is not only unsuccessful, but the car comes to a complete stop. Soon after this, fluid is heard running outside the vehicle, and Melina realizes they must be at a gas station. Upon learning this, Elisa advises she draws attention to herself in order to expose the kidnapper. This is risky, as we don't know if anyone else is even around to hear us cry for help, and the kidnapper's response to this may be less than ideal. But with our life on the line and possibly going to be ended within an hour anyway, we don't have a lot to lose. She tries this and screams for help, but unfortunately it's the worst case scenario and only the driver was around to hear. But at least she's smart enough to hide her phone and even uses her shouts to cover up the sound of Elisa, who won't stop talking on the other end for some reason. Kidnapper is shocked that she's awake but asks if she would kindly be quiet for the duration of the drive, as he needs her alive and doesn't want to kill her. Melina attempts to appeal to this kindness, but he quickly shows just how cruel he can actually be as he digs his hand into her kidney wound. That's gotta hurt. After one more attempt of defiance by wheedling the whiskey bottle as a weapon, the driver threatens to remove her tongue if she keeps acting out, so she drops the glass, defeated. But I guess she doesn't take his bluff seriously, as the moment he gets in the car, she starts screaming again, only for the man to drown her out by blasting music throughout the vehicle. This looks like a good spot to take a break and review everything so far. As mentioned before, it was smart of Melina to grab her phone at the start. However, instead of calling our lover immediately, we need to call the cops. We also shouldn't waste time trying to get others to do that for us, like she does with her sister, when we are perfectly capable of contacting them ourselves. However, once we discover cell service is shoddy at best, we should have the opposite mindset. We won't know if or when we will be able to contact the police or anyone else for that matter again. So if we get in touch with anybody, such as our dad calling to check in on us, we should use that opportunity to tell them of the emergency in as quick and concise a manner as possible so they can get assistance for us. We can always immediately hang up afterwards and attempt to call ourselves, but we need to make sure at least someone knows of our situation so help can be on the way. The next course of action, and ideally done even while attempting to use the phone, is to put our cell in power save mode if it isn't already. Turning down the brightness is smart, but every second of battery life counts, and Power Saver will make it last to its fullest potential. Next, we should look for a means of escape, much like she does in the film. I would recommend finding the tire jack and trying to use it to pry open the trunk, if at all possible. Otherwise, we could attempt to break into the back seat of the car for escape. But this of course would likely alert the driver and incur their wrath, so it's a bit risky but worth a try as a last resort. The other major thing Melina could have done to help her situation is given Elisa more information about the car and kidnapper. Of course, we could send a photo of the man sooner, but how would we inform them about anything else with the vehicle itself, you might ask? Well, for one, when we first woke up, we had a perfect opportunity to see the license plate and color of the car. But of course, we would be in a daze, scared and confused, and focused on saving that cell phone. Wouldn't blame anyone for not thinking of checking the vehicle's details at this time. However, we do still have that camera in the trunk with us that shows us being dragged and stuffed inside. It should have easily been able to pick up at least the color of the car, if not its make, model, and plate as well. All useful information for getting us found and rescued faster. But hey, at least help is looking for us now, and the ever-resourceful Melina might have a few more tricks up her sleeves. Let's see what she does next. She's given some good news, well, goodish all things considered, as she receives a text from Enno to know he's still alive. But we know nothing else about his situation other than that he's being watched. Melina calls the cops again and informs them of her fiancé's current status. Elisa unfortunately has to share some bad news back, and it's that her father is hesitant to pay the ransom. Dad, now is not the time for that, your daughter's life is on the line. The last thing Melina hears is the cops talking about roadblocks, when the signal is lost once again. Thankfully, she now finds the trunk's spare tire compartment. After a bit of a struggle, she manages to get a metal pole from the jack and uses it to start breaking out a taillight. Fortunately for her, the driver just takes this sound as random thrashing and goes back to blasting music in order to drown her out. As their car slows to a crawl thanks to traffic, Melina waves and screams for help. An upstanding citizen eventually comes to check on her but is swiftly taken out by the car flooring it in reverse as the kidnapper drives off in the wrong direction to avoid getting caught. Dang, so close. Melina attempts to call the police once more but goes pale when the phone claims it's an unrecognizable number. She looks in fear as she reads an automated text message on her phone welcoming her to the Czech Republic. Guess they drove that far at some point, but this is enough of a shock to cause her to pass out for a bit. Well, she does deserve a rest, I suppose. Fortunately, the police call her soon after, as they still have access to the number. Melina is unhappy, though, to still be locked in a trunk and furious that the cops aren't doing more to help, so she takes out her frustrations by hanging up and smashing the side mirror that was lying next to her. This does give her a brilliant idea, however, as she sticks a shard out the taillight hole and uses its reflective surface to read the license plate. She's even smart enough to write it down using her blood as ink. Very resourceful. The phone rings again, yet it's not the police this time, but her fiancé Enno. He's in a group call with Melina and her father, explaining that they need the ransom money or they'll both die. She tries to interject that the police are helping, but this news causes Enno to panic, as he tries to once again get her to avoid talking to authorities in order to not anger the kidnapper. During this conversation, however, a truck is heard passing by, and Melina hears it through the phone as well, telling her that Enno is in the car with her. She calls him out on this fact and he admits it, followed by warning them both that if the police stop the car, he's as good as dead, and their only hope is that ransom money. This sure is starting to sound like a ruse. The next call she receives is from Elisa, informing her that her father paid the ransom finally, but there still hasn't been any follow-up or reaction from the kidnappers, meaning nothing has changed except for her dad's bank account. This isn't looking good. And to make matters worse, Melina is too worried about Eno's safety to tell the cops about the license plate number or anything else for that matter. A decision that is amplified when the car soon stops for the border patrol and a text from Eno warns her to keep quiet so they'll live through this. And this right here is why you should never dedicate yourself to someone else completely, as they both could have been rescued. But instead, she follows instructions and stays shut. They finish and drive off, just as her phone gives the low battery warning. Wow, just how cheap or old is that thing to be near empty already, even with all that use? While closing apps on her device, she notices a second person in the photo of the driver she took and re-examines the camera footage. This confirms what some of you might have already suspected. Eno was in on the kidnapping all along. Melina is still in doubt though, and next time the cops call, she demands to know the phone number requesting the ransom. And sure enough, it's Eno's. Possibly still in doubt, however, she doesn't reveal this information to Elisa. Feel like it would be good for the police to know this crucial fact as well though. The bad news keeps piling on as the sound of a boat is heard, and they realize the car has boarded a ferry. The police are going to try and catch them at the other side of the river, but Melina's sanity has shattered at this point as she loses all hope for the situation. Well, while she's coming to terms with all that, let's review the situation ourselves. We should have been suspicious of Eno the moment we discovered he was in the car as well. There would be no reason for him to be sitting up front or allowed access to his phone unless he was in on things as well. Regardless of if he was innocent or not with regard to things, we shouldn't fall for the same worries as before. We need to tell the cops everything we discovered to ensure we both get rescued from this situation. As far as we know, with no drop-off or exchanging location established, this means they can get the ransom money and still do away with us as they please. While I still see this as a sign that they shouldn't be able to harm us, I'd prefer having rescue be on its way than outright relying on kidnappers' willingness to return us unharmed. Especially after the cops tell us the ransom has been paid already, yet nothing changes for our situation. Because of this, and because we absolutely should have figured out Eno betrayed us, it would have been best to scream and shout for the Border Patrol officers while we were there. It's unlikely the kidnappers could have responded in time to harm or stop us, or would have risked a firefight with officers there, so this is the exact moment Melina should have been freed. I think the next opportunity is as soon as we realize we're on a boat, as there should be plenty of other people around and nowhere for the kidnappers to escape to. Worth a try at this point. But instead, Melina is too shooken for this. So let's see what she does instead. She wants answers and uses the dwindling battery life to demand the truth from her fiancé. He's not a complete monster it seems, but far from innocent of course, as he is reluctantly in on this kidnapping that's not going as planned. Apparently he owes a lot of cash to some bad people who you wouldn't want to even owe pennies to, and orchestrated this kidnapping to get the father's money to pay off the debt. No one was supposed to get hurt, or have their organs stolen for that matter, and Eno was supposed to disappear after the kidnappers were paid. Guess the debt collectors have other plans, however, and wanted to collect interest. As Melina forgives him and begs for him to help save her, he claims that he has to let them take her to save his own skin. Wow, what a coward! Undaunted, Melina thinks of a lie and thinks of it quick. She uses a photo of her sister's pregnancy to tell her now former fiancé that he will be a father and is dooming his future child along with her. Sneaky, but this works perfectly, as Eno now attempts to plead with the kidnapper to spare her life. When that of course fails, he does something even more drastic as a struggle is heard and the car screeches to a halt. The trunk opens to reveal her savior, but Eno apparently did as good of a job ensuring the driver was incapacitated as he did ensuring Melina would have been spared, as he's quickly taken out with some lead to the stomach. The kidnapper comes around to shove this corpse in the trunk as well, and finds and destroys Melina's phone in the process. Doesn't matter much now though, with its battery at 2% anyway. They're driving down the road again when she takes her engagement ring off and throws it away, only to hear it hitting the pavement below. This inspires her to use a knife she found on Eno's body to cut away at the bottom of the trunk's storage basin, where she finds a decent-sized hole. It's not exactly big enough to crawl through, but it is big enough for a pole to fit through, which is exactly what she plans to do. After recording a final goodbye message in case this fails, she takes the rod and jams it as hard as she can into the tire spoke, causing the car to lose control and crash. Unfortunately, it crashed into the river and is now slowly filling with water. Melina refuses to die here after all this, however, and takes a deep breath before kicking out the back panel of the trunk, swimming through the car and out the conveniently broken windshield. As police and other emergency service vehicles arrive on the scene, we see Melina just barely make it to the surface of the water, before breaching it and experiencing her first taste of freedom all night. So she made it. But was there anything she could have done differently? Well, overall, for this situation, I pretty much have to say no. Melina played her cards right, played Enno like the fool he was, and managed to escape in the end. The only real pointer will be doing so with less risk to our own health and safety, which could have been achieved by escaping through the hole in the trunk, possibly by kicking and banging with the pipe to make it big enough for us to crawl through. This of course has its own risks, and would lead to the kidnapper's escape, but it's also less likely to land us in hot water and drowning next to our ex's cadaver. Probably would be best overall to just avoid winding up in this situation to begin with. So be careful who you trust. Don't hitchhike if you can help it, and don't throw your life away by dedicating it entirely to someone else. You're worth fighting for all on your own. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, guys. Binge another one and peace out.